Hello YouTube people, it's been a while but I'm back with a book review. So I actually chose this book for my Patreon book club. I still run a Tay book club just over on my Patreon, and I chose this for October, and this is The Witches by Roald Dahl, and I've never read it before but I have seen the original film and I adore the original film. I loved it as a child and I have never read this, and it was October, Halloween time, so I chose The Witches. I'm going to give you my review on this. I'm then going to show you my favourite illustrations because my love Quentin Blake illustrated this book as he illustrated all of Roald Dahl's works, and then I have a Patreon member has sent me her review which I'm going to read and discuss as well. This is all going to be spoilers. Can I say that first? Spoilers throughout the whole entire video, and I'm going to get straight into it. So this came out in 1983 and this is the 1983 edition, and I love this edition. I think it's so gorgeous. I don't really like the new Roald Dahl editions when they're really bright colours. I prefer these older editions, and look at the back. It's completely plain and then just this witch looking up. I think it's absolutely glorious. So this is about a boy who very early on his parents die. We don't even meet his parents, but they die. They're going to Norway to see his grandmother who he adores, who is Norwegian, and they die. Their car goes over in the snow. So his grandmother gets custody of him and he loves his grandmother, and in his parents' will it says that he has to be raised in England in his family home. So his grandmother loves living in Norway, but she has to leave all her things, and she says, okay, I'll go over to your family home, do your parents' wishes that were in their will, and I will raise you in England. So they go over to England, and I loved his grandmother. I loved the illustrations of her, how she's just this like chain cigar smoking woman who tells him all these stories, and she's so lovely. And she used to hunt witches. So witches are women who they can like remove their faces, and they've got these kind of like ugly faces and everything, and these claws, and they want to kill children. That's their main wish, is they hate children. When they can smell children, it's a horrible smell, and they want to rid the world of children. So his grandmother used to hunt witches, but she never found the grand high witch. She never found a witch, but she knows loads of stories about witches. So the beginning of the book is him sitting at his grandmother's feet. She's on her big armchair, chain smoking cigars, and she's telling him stories about witches and what witches have done. I loved those stories. They were so like wicked. I absolutely loved it. It reminded me very much of Mary Poppins. Like Mary Poppins, it is a children's book, but it's kind of really harsh. Like as a child, I would have been way too sensitive for it. There's in Mary Poppins when they go and get some gingerbread and this woman snaps off her fingers and she's like, there's the gingerbread, and her fingers taste like gingerbread. Like there's so many really weird, sinister things within it that are really creepy, which I loved. So there was loads of different stories about witches, what they'd done to different children. So one of them that I loved was that a little girl had gone missing and her parents couldn't find her, and then they had a painting on their wall, and they looked at the painting and she was inside the painting, and they would see her move around in the painting, and she was trapped in the painting forever, and a witch had done that to her. So it was loads of different things that the witches had done. So his grandmother's saying like, you know, beware of witches, and then they're going to go back to Norway. They're going to go on holiday to Norway, and his grandmother becomes sick, and this is really when the story begins. So she becomes sick and the doctor says, you can't go away to Norway, you're too sick. You'll have to have a holiday in England. What about Bournemouth? And Bournemouth is a seaside town, and so they're like, the sea air will help you. So they go to this lovely hotel in Bournemouth, and the boy has two little pet mice, and the mice they run around the hotel. So he's searching for his mice. He goes into this room and there's all these women in the room, and these women are having an annual meeting, and he's hiding because he's trying to find his mice. He doesn't want to interrupt their meeting, and then he realizes these women are witches. I loved that scene, how they were like taking off their wigs, taking off their hair. They always have to wear gloves because they don't have fingernails, they have long claws, so they take off their gloves. I loved the whole thing of that, how they just looked so normal, and then he's like watching in horror as they like remove their faces and everything, and they're these hideous witches. And they're talking about the Grand High Witch is there, so she's the leader of them all, and she's saying how we can get rid of all the children in England. So she comes up with this idea to turn all the children in England into mice, and then all these mice will be exterminated and all the children in England will be dead. and that will be it. They then realise that he's in the meeting and they turn him into a mouse. And then there's this other little boy who they lure in and they turn him into a mouse as well. So he goes to his grandmother, but he can talk like a normal human being even though he is a little mouse. He is still himself in the mouse and can talk like a human. So he runs to his grandmother in the hotel and she realises that he's been turned into a mouse and this other boy has been turned into a mouse as well. And then they come up with a plan, and I'll leave it there for anyone who hasn't read the rest of it. They come up with a plan. What are they going to do with these witches? They have them all in the hotel. What are they going to do to get rid of the Grand High Witch? And then we get to the end of the story and he isn't turned back into a boy. He is just always going to be a mouse and live with his grandmother, and they are going to spend their lives hunting witches, going round the world, finding different witches and hunting them down and getting rid of all of them so they don't kill any of the children in the world. There is a scene in it where he says, well, how long does a mouse live? And his grandmother says, not very long, 10 years is how long you can live. It's not the normal life of a human, but now you're a mouse. And then he says, how long are you going to live? And she says, well, you know, I might be able to make it to 10 years. And he's like, that's fine with me. I loved that moment. I know people think it's sad. And on the Patreon, I have people saying to me like, oh my God, the ending's so sad. I didn't think it was sad at all. I don't know if I'm just evil or whatever. I just thought it was so sweet. So the whole thing is like, he's never going to be turned back into a boy. He's always going to be a mouse and he's going to be dead in 10 years. And his grandmother's going to be dead in 10 years. And he's like, I don't want to live without you, Grandma. So I'm absolutely fine with that. And that's it. So you know that they're going to travel the world, go on this adventure, try and find the second in command High Witch, and then hunt down all the witches in the world and go on this great adventure together. But he will never be turned into a boy. He will never become a man. He will always be a boy, and he will, you know, die in about 10 years' time with his grandmother, and they will die together. I thought that was lovely. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, because everyone was like, oh no, it's so sad that he's a mouse forever. I thought he was going to die in the end, because everyone was saying, oh my God, it's so sad, the ending. And I was like, oh no, I'm not ready for him to die. I'm not ready for him to die yet. But I thought it was lovely. He was like, I don't want to live without you, grandmother. I don't want to live in a world without you. I was like, oh God, because he only has her. He doesn't have his parents anymore. And he loves his grandmother so much that he's like, yes, this is fine. This is our life's mission that we're going to do. It's great. And I don't mind being a mouse forever. I'll never be a boy. I'm fine with that as long as I get to live with you and I never have to live without you. And I just thought that was so lovely, so nice. I don't know why. I just thought it was really sweet. I also really liked how they were talking about little things she'd made for him. So like a sugar bowl she turned into a little bath for him, and little gadgets she'd put in her house, because obviously he's a mouse now forever, to make it easier for him to get around. Like the words and like, of course he's a mouse. Like, his grandmother was my favourite character. I just loved her. She was so eccentric, and I loved how also other people were like a bit freaked out by her. So the another boy that's turned into a mouse is called Bruce, and she goes to see Bruce's parents, and before that she's even spoken to them, they're like looking at her like who is this woman? She's wearing black lace, she's like dressed very old fashioned, and she's chain smoking cigars, and I just loved her. I loved her so much. She was my favourite character in the whole book. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really fun book, very kind of like sinister moments within it as well, but I did really love it. I have my laptop here and I have a review from one of my patrons and what they thought about it. So I absolutely loved it, but this review is from Amy ASAP 25. I'm a big fan of the original 1990 movie. I always love the opening when the grandmother tells Luke about the little girl Erica, who is trapped inside the painting. I hadn't read the book before, so enjoyed reading it to see its differences. Oh my God, the same as me. That was my favourite story, was the girl trapped in the painting. And I love the original film so much. I know there was a remake, but I'm never interested in remakes if I love the original. So because I love the original, I never wanted to see the remake. I wasn't interested in it. Came out 2020, didn't it? I didn't care about it at all. Love the original. I think the original is great, but it'd be interesting if I watched the film now, having read the book, and saw the differences. I enjoyed the part where the Grand High Witch was explaining to all the England witches about how they have to buy all the sweet shops, and then she explains how her formula would change the children into mice. I was quite surprised by the ending of the book. In the film, the characters are given a happy ending. Yes, in many films I feel that, like in many children's films, that the endings are completely changed from the original. They're giving this very like Hollywood, everything's fine, everything's all right, but the book is like sinister and kind of sad endings, which I think are nicer to have, like the more realistic endings to things. And also, I don't think that's a sad ending of The Witches. I think it's kind of a nice ending. I don't know what's wrong with me. By changing that one of the witches survives and is a good witch, whereas the book ending I felt was more realistic but bittersweet because Luke would die, but at least he didn't have to live in a world without his grandmother. I look forward to your next book club pick. Thank you very much, Amy. I agree. I loved the end of this one, that he would always be with her. Like, I didn't think it was sad. I thought it was kind of cute. Bittersweet is actually a very good word for it. Bittersweet, because he'll never grow up to be a man. He'll always be a boy. He'll always be a child because he's only going to live for the next 10 years. He's not going to grow up and have his own family. But at least he doesn't have to live in a world without his grandmother, and they're going to make it their life's mission to hunt down the witches. I thought it was gorgeous. I loved it. So thank you, Amy, for reading it along with me. My next book club pick, which is on the Patreon, you can join my Patreon. I'll link it down below. I'm always do videos all the time on my Patreon. I think it's 80p a month if you want to join. I do vlogs, read-alongs, reviews, everything. We are currently reading Ballet Shoes. That's what we're reading at the moment. So I'm going to end this video on me showing you my favourite illustrations by Quentin Blake in this book. But I loved them all. I loved every single illustration. I think this is one of Quentin Blake's best work. I mean, James and the Giant Peach, let's not get ahead of ourselves. James and the Giant Peach is still my favourite Roald Dahl and my favourite illustrations from Quentin Blake. But there were some gorgeous bits within this, and when also the images were in the text, I really thought that worked really well. So I'm going to end it on my favourite bits from it, but I did love it all. My favourite Quentin Blake pieces, but I absolutely loved The Witches. Let me know what you think of The Witches. I love this picture with his grandmother. So that's in their front room. There's his grandmother sitting on her armchair with a cigar, and then him just by her feet. And I love it. I love all the like shading in this. I think it's so gorgeous. It's so cozy looking as well. I really like this scene as well, and this is when the witches, they're going from normal to their witchy self. But I like how the picture runs across the top, and Quentin Blake often does this where like the illustrations will be in the text or around the top. It's not just one plain page of illustrations, and I think this is so gorgeous the way it runs along. Like this framed, I would frame something like this with the text. I just think it looks really good. This scene I thought was done really well. It's when the witches are all turning into mice. So you can see some of them, you can see the witches, and then you can see them turning into mice, and then the page spills diagonally across. So as you can see, it just spills across like that, which I really like, and them all turning into little mice. I love this scene, and the chairs are done so beautifully as well. The detail to everything is why I love Quentin Blake. This is my favourite illustration of the whole entire book. I just love it when Quentin Blake illustrates nature. I don't know what it is about plants and nature that he illustrates that I love so much. But this is the boy, he's building himself a tree house. So he's in a tree, and I just love it so much. All the leaves and the branches, and I think it's such a gorgeous picture. I would frame this picture. I think it's so gorgeous. And that's it. I'm going to end this video here. I hope you have enjoyed this. Leave a comment down below if you have, and I will see you again soon on my Patreon for another video, and I will see you in the future here on my YouTube.